For what?
Stop following us. You are impeding operations. This is the United States federal government.
Over here. I gotta get
This
to
is
my house.
This is your warning.
You gotta get to
All
my
right?
house.
Go home to your kids. I guarantee you're not gonna like the outcome. Go home to your children. It's Sunday.
Yeah, go exactly. Let people go to church.
You did not learn from what just happened? Go home.
Learn what?
That last might have been a little hard to hear, but one of the last things the officer said was, quote, "Did you not learn from what just happened?" To be clear, it's not illegal to observe immigration enforcement as long as you don't interfere with their work. That same day, a chaotic scene unfolded at a gas station in nearby St. Paul, Minnesota. Video shows a man who's been identified as 27-year-old Orban Serrano being forcefully pulled from his vehicle, pinned down, and dragged across the ground into an ICE vehicle. Serrano had stopped for gas when federal officers approached his vehicle, questioning his immigration status. When Serrano did not roll down his window, officers shattered it. Now, this video is particularly hard to watch, especially toward the end. It starts with Serrano being forcefully pulled out of his car by at least 4 officers. Now, in the bottom center of your screen, you can see Orban Serrano in the tan leather jacket. His body is now limp. Officers are carrying him by an arm and a leg while his other limbs drag on the pavement. He appears to be unconscious, and he's placed in a waiting vehicle. Serrano's family spoke with a local Minnesota news outlet and confirmed that he is alive and being held in a detention center in El Paso, Texas. He told his family that he was injured and he had not received medical treatment. The next incident is another tough watch. On Tuesday, federal officers dragged a woman from her car in broad daylight, even as she tried to explain that she was just trying to get to a doctor's appointment. Two officers then aggressively force her against the car and handcuff her. You can clearly hear her saying she's disabled and she's just trying to get to the doctor. DHS claims she was an agitator who was obstructing ICE operations. She said in a statement that while in custody, she repeatedly asked for a doctor, but was instead taken to a detention center where she lost consciousness. It was at that point that she was taken to a hospital. According to the woman's counsel, she was treated for injuries consistent with assault. Here's another video. Sadly, there are just too many of these. Watch this one carefully, though. Several federal officers pinned a man to the ground. Amidst the mayhem, you will see what appears to be a federal officer repeatedly slamming his knee into a man's face as other officers hold that man down. You will see 5 officers on top of one man while a bystander begs them to stop. Again, this is hard to watch.
Hey! Stop kneeing him in the face! That's his face! Stop it!
On Wednesday, another person was shot by a federal officer in Minneapolis. This time, it was a Venezuelan immigrant. A neighbor told the New York Times that they heard gunshots and saw federal agents swarm the neighborhood using smoke grenades as they tried to get the man to come out of the house. DHS says the man ran from a traffic stop and assaulted the officer who eventually caught up with him. Again, this is the Department of Homeland Security's version of events. We don't have video of this incident, but a Minnesota lawmaker released what they say is a 911 call from the man's wife. In that call, she says her husband was chased into the house and was shot through the door. Protests erupted afterward. Tear gas and flashbang grenades were deployed. During this, a family heading home from their son's basketball game got caught between protesters and law enforcement. The mother says a flashbang grenade exploded and tear gas that was already in the air filled their car. This is what the car looked like afterward. She said her 6-month-old baby who was in the car became unconscious and could not breathe.
He was just like lifeless, like he had like foam like around his mouth, and you can see he had tears coming out his eyes. I was giving him mouth to mouth, and I remember stopping and I said, I will give you all my breath till you get yours back, because nobody wants to see their kids like that.
It was hard to hear what she said through her tears, but it was, quote, nobody wants to see their kids like that. The family says the baby is recovering. You might be asking yourself how any of this is legal in America in 2026. In fact, in September, the Supreme Court issued a ruling allowing ICE agents in the Los Angeles area to question and detain people based on what they look like, what language they speak, their accent, who they work for, and even where they happen to be. The ruling was narrow. It specifically pertained to the Los Angeles area, but immigration forces across the country have seized upon it, using it as a license to target people of color, which is interesting because the Constitution actually has a specific amendment, the Fourth Amendment, which prohibits that sort of thing. No one in America, whether born here, visiting, or seeking asylum, or undocumented, should be racially profiled or detained without due process. However, in his concurring opinion, Justice Brett Kavanaugh said American citizens had nothing to worry about. Quote, if the officers learn that the individual they stopped is a U.S. citizen or otherwise lawfully in the United States, they promptly let the individual go, end quote. Just let him go. We now know that this is not the case. These so-called Kavanaugh stops are laying the groundwork for a country where Americans, particularly those of color, are expected to prove they belong. Here is another video. I'm joined now by Radley Balco, longtime journalist covering civil liberties and the criminal justice system. He's the author of the Watch column on Substack and the author of the book Rise of the Warrior Cop, which is entirely about something else, Radley, except it sounds like that's what we're talking about right now. It is unbelievable in the time that you and I have been talking about this since the beginning of the Trump administration, how this has escalated.
It really is. I mean, it's hard to even kind of to put words on what we're seeing. I mean, these are images that, you know, when I wrote that book 12 years ago, I never would have envisioned it getting as bad as it is.
And part of the reason you wouldn't have envisioned it is because when you wrote this book 12 years ago, we didn't know how to use video the way we do today. So you would think that the more that it's out there and the more that you see these videos, the better it would be. Is it?
But, you know, I mean, you know, in the past when police agencies have killed someone, even in a really unjust case or even in really justified killings, they, you know, there is some solemnity that they show. They attempt to sort of at least, you know,
patch it up.
Put up the pretense of abiding by the rule of law. They say there's going to be a fair and impartial investigation.
Patch it up.
We're not going to prejudge. Maybe in some cases, you know, they've put out the person who was killed's criminal record in an attempt to undermine, you know, their credibility. But there was always this idea that, you know, we're going to let the system work this out. We're going to abide by the rule of law. What we saw after the killing of Renee Good is just this immediate. There was no pretense to this idea of an independent investigation. It was she tried to run, or did run over this officer. She is guilty. She is a domestic terrorist. She's an agitator. This officer did absolutely nothing wrong. He's a hero. I mean, it was just immediate, you know, everything, anybody who gets in the way of these officers, whether intentionally or not, legally or not, they are immediately deemed as sort of a threat to the, you know, very moral fabric of this country. It is, I mean, propaganda, you know, worthy basically of the North Korean press office.
So when you were talking about the warrior cop, you were talking about sort of a system that was developing around the United States, police forces getting sort of militarized. That was a sort of a different story, a different narrative than this almost seemingly personalized police force of Donald Trump's, where he says things that don't have a real basis in reality, and then there's this group of shock troops who can carry it out. It's a slightly different problem.
Right. So, over the last 20 years, as I've been writing about this issue, I've had debates with law enforcement, leaders and officials about what police tactics are appropriate, about, striking the balance between public safety and civil liberties. But there was always this shared understanding, right, that police serve the public, that police, should be subjected to the rule of law, and that when they do violate people's civil and constitutional rights, they should be held accountable. What we're seeing now from this administration is this idea that officers don't serve the public. They serve Donald Trump and this administration. They're pretty explicit about this. They are not accountable. Stephen Miller has said outright that they have absolute immunity, which is wrong in the law, but also a terrible message to send. And also just explicit misstatements of the law when it comes to the use of force. I mean, Trump, at one point said one reason Renee Good was killed was because she was really disrespectful of law enforcement. Well, there's no, that is perfectly legal. That's protected by the First Amendment. And, even if it weren't, it's not a capital crime that merits an execution. But, by this administration's account, both of those things are true. There's a reason why now what we're seeing right now in Minneapolis is being condemned by law enforcement officials across the country. I mean, the police chief in Minneapolis has said, ICE is making it impossible for his own officers to do their jobs, to keep the public safe in this community. I mean, they're pulling people out of their cars and then leaving abandoned cars in the middle of the street, which is causing traffic jams, which is tying up 911 lines because people are calling to report
causing safety issues.
The street is blocked. Apparently, this is common enough that the city put out a statement the other day saying, they will, if your car gets towed because the owner has been detained and basically kidnapped by ICE, that you can get it back, and the city warned you. I mean, that's how common it is that they had to put out this statement. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit because you just see these video after video after video, and it's so overwhelming and it's so lawless and chaotic. I mean, there is nothing, democratic about what's happening here. I mean, you don't even see this in authoritarian countries, right? There's at least some sort of order in authoritarian countries. This is just random violence.
This is a good point. Yes, it's got a randomness and a chaos to it. Michelle Goldberg was saying to me, though, and I think I kind of share this view, the prevalence of these videos, the act of resistance of people who just press record may be having an important effect here. Maybe making people who don't feel affected by this, who don't think they're coming for you. It doesn't matter whether they're coming for you or not. This just can't be right. And I think it's having an influence on changing people's thinking.
It absolutely is. I mean, I think it's had a dramatic effect on the polls. I mean, we've seen support for ICE drop. I think last I saw it was like 35 or 40 points since Trump was inaugurated for a second term. Overwhelmingly, approval for Trump's immigration policy has really fallen through the floor. The problem is that I don't think they care. I mean, Trump, he obviously cares about the midterms, but he doesn't have to worry about re-election. Stephen Miller certainly doesn't care about public opinion. And there's no accountability from the very top to the very bottom, right? So the Supreme Court has said Trump can't be held criminally accountable for anything that's, could be remotely interpreted as an official act. These ICE officers have been told, and Border Patrol have been told explicitly by Miller that they have absolute immunity. They're not going to be criminally charged. It's almost impossible to sue them civilly. And anybody kind of up the chain of command, who does anything that's later interpreted as criminal, I think you can assume that Trump's going to pardon them on the way out of office. So, you've got these people who are told that the people who oppose you are subhuman. They are, they poison the blood of the country. They are domestic terrorists. So do whatever you have to do to stop them. And we're not going to hold you accountable if you go too far. I mean, that is exactly the formula that gets you the kind of videos that we're seeing now.
Riley, thank you as always. Riley Balco is a longtime journalist. He's the author of The Watch on Substack, and he's the author of the book, The Rise of the Warrior Cop. All right, coming up, a path to a blue wave after the midterms is taking shape. I'll have to talk to somebody who's very familiar with turning a red state blue about what success could look like for Democrats and how. The former Alabama senator and current candidate for...
Strangely enough, I done already told these people what to expect whenever they went into these sanctuary towns and doing this stuff. I knowed it was coming, and I think others did too. Anytime you're going to use strong arm tactics, especially on a project this big, you're going to have boo-boos. You're going to have violators. You're going to have emotions and people becoming absurd. Just like whenever I was in Wheeling, West Virginia, talking to a 911 dispatcher as they was knocking down my door, my hotel room door. Fortunately, I had a recorder going, or I thought it was going to be fortunate. Come to find out, it didn't matter whether or not I had proof or not. The federal judge and the Homeland Security was going to do whatever that they wanted to do, regardless whether I had all the proof in the world towards them saying otherwise. Went in, dragged me out, throw me in jail. Didn't know what my charges was until about a week or two later. Then come to find out I'd been charged for being an assassin on my way to take out George Walter Bush's life. Then after we had the hearing and my attorney brings it out before the courts that Mr. Jackson didn't threaten no president. Mr. Jackson didn't tell the 911 dispatcher that he was on his way to Washington, D.C. to do bodily harm to one of our American presidents. It still got objected. It still got thrown out. And the next thing you know, it took about 6 months out of my life towards them studying me in Butler, North Carolina. My rights has been violated, as far as I'm concerned, ever since I went to Kenton, Tennessee, requesting for them to evaluate the situation that I had recently just got through going through, pertaining to my biological dad attacking me the night before, even though I had 64 2-inch staples going up and down my belly. Ever since then, my rights has been violated again and again and again. Just like whenever they confiscated the sword from the ministry, I go down to Jackson, Tennessee to the courthouse. Now I'm going to do an open protest. And within 4 or 5 hours, had about 6 or 8 officers come in there and grab me up, throw me in the back end of the police car, and take me to Bolivar. Said I was mentally unfit to be out in the eyes of the public. We needed to study you and see what was going on with you, Mr. Jackson. Really? And the whole time I've been standing up for love, grace, mercy, and peace? Really? Then I go up to Washington, D.C. for the 3rd time that year, at the same time that year. And the next thing you know, I wind up in the same hospital that Hinckley's in. And they can't hold you no more than 3 days, 72 hours, but they can sure aggravate the piss out of your life within that 72 hours. They can't hold you no longer than 72 hours, according to the pretense that I've been taught or told. And then after that, if a doctor cannot hear you say that you're a bodily harm either to yourself or to the public, they have to let you go. They have to let you go. But the fact of the matter is, the long arm of the law has been violating their principles now for quite some time. Now, I'm not saying that I don't support ICE, because I do. I support ICE. I support in what they're doing right now pertaining to illegal immigrants, and we should not have sanctuary cities that exist in our country. But there's limits in how you go about doing whatever that you're going to go about doing.
Until all of this violence stops. I certainly hope that if it stops, the regime is still in place. He doesn't immediately start negotiations that will end up actually strengthening the regime, and in that sense, forgetting about or even rewarding them for the massive violence against the people of Iran. I do think we have options for weakening the regime. For example, using naval power and air power to prevent them from continuing to violate our sanctions on the export of Iranian oil. We did a lot of that in Trump's first term. And in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been less enforcement, and a lot more oil has been getting out and going primarily to China. We can stop that. We can certainly try to stop that. that's a medium-term thing. That's not going to affect today's demonstrations. There, I think the question is, are there ways of weakening the regime and its security forces?
Elliot Abrams, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Christian.
After a break, so much talk of intervention from a president who pledged to end wars, not start them. Next, a report from Greenland, where people fear for their future now.
That is the worst case scenario that, in a month I'm American.
Well, that's probably true. I mean, that would be my concern too if I was a Greenlandian. I guess you call them Greenlandians. I don't know how that you would pile that into a big figure like that.
Campaign, but they weaponized it. Then they used legitimate law enforcement to try to take down Donald Trump. So this goes back to the basic narrative you and I have said for a long time. This was all a hoax. It was all to try to overthrow the will of the people and the voters and to stop Trump from being the president of the United States of America. And not only that, now you've got one of the core people they used to try to attack Trump telling you that's exactly what happened behind closed doors.
It's amazing, and we all saw it happening and knew it was happening. I want to bring up another person we both know. We both know him from our tenure at CNN. I know him because he posed as a White House correspondent who was so unbiased, just interested in the truth. Let's bring in Jim.
Yeah. Oh, Jesus Christ. It is, it's my worst nightmare. I thought we were rid of this clown 4 years ago, but no, they come back with a vengeance. Fortunately, the D.C. restaurant scene is set up where, the MAGA people have their restaurants and their places they like to go, and they're not the places I like to go. Okay. So I won't say where those places are because I don't want them to show up there, but so far, so good. It's okay.
So breaking news, Jim was never unbiased, but at least he's eating well, Ben.
Yeah, I don't have to worry that I'm going to see him at dinner because I'm not going to the vegan restaurants that this guy is eating at. But what I can tell you about Jim is there's nothing more pretentious than a guy sitting in the front row of the White House trying to make a name for himself, acting like he's a journalist when really he uses the Lord's name in vain to describe Donald Trump, the sitting president, and says he's a clown. That is how much they hated him. Now, I don't think you got that job at CNN at that moment in time without believing that behind closed doors. That's probably part of the process of vetting. Like, we need you to hate Trump. We're going to put you at the White House. You kind of got to act like you don't hate him, but really your whole goal every day is to hate on Donald Trump and to act like you're a journalist while doing it. And this is, I think, important for the American people. I would say about 98% of the people in the Washington press corps, this is exactly what they feel. And by the way, they're probably in the same restaurant with Jim, eating the same vegan food, okay? Like the special burgers that have no meat in them. That's who they are. So get used to it. It's not changing and they will not cover it.
And just to remind viewers of what it was like during the Obama tenure on immigration specifically, let's watch Josh Earnest at the podium answering about the harsh ICE tactics.
Yeah.
There have been reports that Department of Homeland Security, ICE, have begun removal operations. I think what they're calling it, others are calling it raids. I'm wondering if the administration can confirm that those operations have begun and whether the White House has had input directly with DHS about how those operations should be handled and whether there are any concerns about striking fear into the communities, including those who may be here legally, living with some of these other folks as these are carried out.
Mm-hmm. David, for individual operations, I'd refer you to the Department of Homeland Security.
And he went on a little bit after that, but I love how he just casually sipped his coffee at the podium. The press never gave me that luxury.
Yeah, never did. And even the raid videos have come out this week. I love X because there's people that have gone back and they're like, hey, did any of the media go on raids with ICE back then? They did. And guess what? They look exactly like what ICE is doing right now and the same type of arrests and raids. But they didn't go after them. They actually were encouraging it. They were using it as a, hey, look how good Obama is on these types of issues. I also go back to Barack Obama. He was the, deporter in chief, and no one batted an eye. That dude was deporting people left and right. They didn't cover it. They put kids in cages. Remember, that was created by them as well. No one batted an eye at that. AOC wasn't crying down there. Joe Biden wasn't crying down there. There weren't any first ladies down there crying on the Democratic side either. They did all of the same things that Donald Trump is doing now, and no one cared because they said, well, it's our guy that's doing it. And now all of a sudden, when we do it, what do they say? We're at a civil war. Go out and attack ICE agents. Get the F out of our city, as the mayor of Minneapolis said. So the only thing that's changed is the rhetoric of the Democratic Party, because they hate Trump and they hate law and order. And look, the Democratic Party, I've said this before, they're dead. They're filled with Marxists, socialists, and communists. And that is who they are. So they hate anything that is law and order.
Ben Ferguson saying it like it is. Thank you. Well, next.
That was pretty deep.
Explain their red line, which is Greenland is not for sale or for swallowing up. Still, Greenlanders worry about an American takeover. CNN's Nick Robertson went there to speak to them himself.
It's 11 a.m., daybreak off the coast of Greenland, the strategic Danish island President Trump wants for American security. 150 miles from the Arctic Circle, it is a winter wonderland of stark, snowy beauty. Out here in these remote fields, it seems impossible to imagine that this tranquil Arctic wilderness could really be at the heart of a geopolitical crisis that has the United States pitted against its NATO allies, potentially threatening to upend decades of global security. Aaron Josvassen, an Inuit, a native Greenlander, is taking us seal hunting. Food from the land and sea is a core Inuit connection with nature, a cultural totem.
So I know we're waiting for the seal, looking out for the seal. But Donald Trump says there's Russian and Chinese ships here. Where are they? There's no ship from China or Russia. Donald Trump says that it's not enough just to be friends with Greenland and have a treaty, but he has to own it. What do you say?
I'm afraid nature will destroy it and many animals will disappear.
Greenland is massive, more than 1,600 miles from Arctic tip to Atlantic tail, so wide it straddles several time zones. It is also geographically strategic, sits right between the US and Russia, adjacent to newly thawing polar shipping lanes. But despite its size, barely 57,000 people live on the ice-shrouded island, most of them, like Aaron, Inuit.
Inuit have been here in Greenland for 4,500 years at least, maybe longer.
Sarah Olsvig is also Inuit, a former Greenland politician in the Danish parliament, stands up for Inuit rights.
But President Trump now says that he has to own Greenland. That's the only way psychologically that he thinks that the deal will be right.
If the case is so that he really thinks that Greenland is so important for the US, well, then there's something to talk about, and let's solve it through dialogue.
Is there dignified dialogue right now?
I think we are far from what we would call a dignified dialogue. I think that's obvious.
Inuit are traditionally quiet, but what they say now will be the single biggest factor facing a Trump takeover. Mia Chemnitz is a successful businesswoman, has been silent until now.
Does Donald Trump understand Greenland?
I'm afraid that he understands everything and that he doesn't care.
She specializes in Inuit clothing, but she's got orders to fill, so she's taking us to her workshop.
Donald Trump and his government are very welcome to invest in Greenland. We're always looking for investments we want to develop. I don't think it's about that.
What's it about?
I think it's about land.
Donald Trump wants a big country.
I'm afraid so, yeah.
Land grab.
Inside her tiny workshop, she is busy, ready to hire more staff. Items like seal mitts, jackets and trousers making a comeback. Exports possible because the animals are hunted for food as well as the hides. But Trump's Greenland grab is crimping her business, putting her own expansion plans on hold.
Well, if you don't know which country you're living in a month, then, you know.
Is that real for you right now?
No, I don't want it to be real. I really try to push that thought down. But that is the worst case scenario that, you know, in a month I'm American. We don't even have military in Greenland because we don't do war. We wouldn't be able to resist the American military. No one can resist the American military.
Trump isn't the first president to try to get Greenland. The US tried shortly after buying Alaska from Russia more than 150 years ago, tried again in 1910. And then after World War II, US President Harry Truman secretly offered Denmark $100 million in gold. This time, Donald Trump seems determined to have it his way.
And coming up,
I was scared to death while I was doing this movie.
How one Palestinian child's desperate cries for help captured world attention. I speak to the director of The Voice of Hind Rajad after a break.
I can tell you what I think the reason why our military has decided that they want to try to set up shop that far up in between Russia and the United States, going up towards the North Pole, is the fact that somebody has sat down and looked at the big picture and said, you know what? If we're going to maintain our status flow here in the United States, we really do need to have bases set up in Greenland. And I'm pretty sure if this government was to use a different strategy, that they probably wouldn't have no trouble at all, because basically they're defenseless up there. And it really don't make no difference. It really don't make no sense for the Greenlanders to not have some sort of a military base defense, because what if China wanted to take them over? What if Russia wanted to take them over? To me, they need to be looking at this from a different angle. No, I don't think that they should have to give up their sovereignty pertaining to who they are and what they stand for. But at the same time, you got to have a little bit of common sense and understanding, hey, things is going to get bad according to the Bible, that as we shall see the days approaching, that no flesh shall be saved, that there's going to be major, major events happening upon this earth. And whenever push comes to shove, whenever it comes to the survivalness of each continent, of each nation, each country, they're going to have a tendency more so of taking care of their own than they are taking care of us. I mean, we seen that during COVID, whenever we had a supply ship coming to America filled full of medical supplies, and the leader of China called them up and said, turn the boat around and come back. Even though we'd already made agreement in buying this material. You know what they done? They turned the boat around and they come back. And that was in the process of an emergency during the time that we was basically struggling with COVID. So if China's willing to do that at their own accord, don't you think some of these other countries would do the same? It don't matter if it was China, Russia, or whoever. Whenever it comes to taking care of their own, sure they would. Sure they would. Our Pentagon, CIA leaders knows this, and because of it, they are looking at all the weaknesses as well as the strengths involved in a doomsday type scenario. And from that perspective, I can say, you know what? I can well understand the reason why they want Greenland. Because it does leave us vulnerable up into that area, that if Russia was to go in, or China, and do a takeover, they would be that much closer to us. They would have that much more of an advantage towards coming in on top of us and invading us, not just with their missiles, but hand-to-hand guerrilla warfare. And you know, if Donald Trump was to express and explain that to the people, I think the people would have more of a tendency of understanding the reason why that our CIA finds it to be interesting to begin with.
Lawsuits right now. We're litigating from coast to coast. We're bringing the hammer down anywhere we could prevent the non-citizens from voting, making sure we have equal access to poll watchers, cleaning up the voting rolls. We have a case in the front of the Supreme Court right now where we could prevent 17 states from counting absentee ballots after Election Day. You would think these are all common sense and reasonable things, but they're not. But the Democrats don't think so. We think so, and that's why we're out there fighting every day to make sure we make it as easy as possible to vote and as hard as possible to cheat.
Yeah, and you mentioned that passing the SAVE Act. Scott Pressler mentioned it. Democrats, where are you? It's just, simple voter ID seems like a good idea. All right, Chairman Gruters, thank you. Well, breaking news on the U.S. push to acquire Greenland. This just in, President Trump posting on Truth Social that he is serious about putting tariffs on countries that do not support the United States acquisition. Now, starting February 1st, he says there will be a 10% tariff on a number of European countries. That will rise to 25% in June and will continue to ratchet up until a deal is reached. So tariffs on those who do not support the U.S. acquisition of Greenland. Tariffs have worked to great effect in a number of these high-stakes situations. Mexico comes to mind during the first term. They put troops on their northern border after Trump threatened tariffs. We will see what these European countries do. We'll keep a close eye and keep you abreast of any developments. All right, coming up, Golden Globes host Nikki Glaser says some jokes were cut for being too woke. And is Hollywood finally learning its lesson? Comedian Rob Schneider joins me next.
Well, that's going to do it for this morning, Saturday. What is today? 15th? Is already half the month went by. Let me look here and see. What is today? What is today? Today is the 17th. Wow, it's flying right on by, ain't it? Yep, today is the 17th. Man. Saturday the 17th of January 2026. Tell me time ain't flying. There's not enough hours in the day, and the older you get, the quicker time goes by. Good luck to all of us. God bless. God bless America, and God bless our troops, and shalom.